Recently, there has been a series of shockwaves which have rocked German politics. Germany's center-right CDU party had proposed a bill which would have limited immigration and ramped up deportations of criminals. The bill was narrowly defeated by a 350 to 338 margin, but it is notable for the fact that the CDU and the AfD worked together in a legislative setting. This has caused an uproar throughout the German political establishment, and has raised questions about if the Cordon Sanitaire is finally collapsing. The Cordon Sanitaire is the term for a leftist political strategy in which all of the mainstream parties agree to not vote with or form coalitions with right-wing parties. In order for the strategy to work, it relies upon tepid, center-right conservative parties to denounce anyone to their right. The Cordon Sanitaire is not a phenomenon limited to one country, and since 1945, center-right parties across Europe have embraced the strategy, much to the detriment of their nations. It represents a massive obstacle to enacting genuine right-wing change, but as of lately, questions have been raised as to whether or not the Cordon Sanitaire has begun to crack. As previously mentioned, the mere fact that the CDU and the AfD worked together on an immigration bill has caused the German establishment to lose their minds. Further complicating matters is the fact that Germany is holding a federal election later this month. Recent terrorist attacks have caused the AfD to surge in the polls, and the increasingly unpopular left-wing parties are counting on the CDU to ensure that the Cordon Sanitaire holds. So then, is the Cordon Sanitaire finally collapsing? The answer is unclear for a few reasons. The fate of the Cordon Sanitaire in Germany hinges on the CDU and their leader, Friedrich Merz. Merz has noticed that the AfD's anti-immigration platform is popular among normal Germans, and seeking to benefit his own political prospects, he has announced a 5-point plan to reduce immigration. This has caused the left-wing SPD and Green parties to rule out the possibility of forming a coalition with him unless he retracts his plan. Even though he currently leads the polls, the CDU is not popular enough to have an outright majority, so if Friedrich Merz wants to become chancellor, he must coalition with another party in order to pass the 50% threshold. The obvious solution would be to form a coalition with the AfD, who are opposed to mass migration and are the second most popular party in Germany behind the CDU. However, Merz and many CDU leaders have publicly ruled out forming a governing coalition with the AfD. They are desperate to betray their country and keep the AfD out. After all, they are called conservatives for a reason. However, because of Merz's 5-point plan on immigration, none of the leftist parties are willing to coalition with the CDU. In order to win the chancellor's office, the CDU must form a coalition with someone, but no one outside of the AfD is willing to work with them. At this point, you may be asking, if the CDU is leading in the polls but does not have an outright majority, what is stopping them from forming a minority government? CDU General Secretary Carsten Linnemann has publicly ruled out this option, saying that Germany cannot afford to have a minority government for reasons relating to economics and geopolitical stability. CDU leaders have been vocal about the necessity of reaching a coalition with someone, but they obstinately refuse to work with the only party that has answers to Germany's problems. Bearing all of this in mind, who will ultimately control the government in the coming weeks? Is it possible for the Cordon Sanitaire to collapse despite official statements from CDU party leadership? A German substack writer by the name of Eugyppius foresees 3 possible outcomes. The outcome which Eugyppius believes to be the most plausible is unfortunately a realignment to the left, in which the CDU and SPD negotiate an uneasy coalition to maintain the Cordon Sanitaire. It is very conceivable that Merz will abandon his 5-point plan and betray his CDU voters. However, as Eugyppius points out, the SPD is less willing to coalition with the CDU than the CDU is willing to coalition with the SPD. The recent immigration bill in which Merz voted with the AfD has caused many SPD politicians to refuse any political coalition that would make Merz chancellor. The second and worst outcome, according to Eugyppius, would be the ascendancy of a leftist coalition government. In this situation, the CDU prioritizes maintaining the Cordon Sanitaire, and no party can reach the 50% threshold. The election continues to a runoff phase, but still no candidate can obtain a majority. If this happens, the election then proceeds to a third phase, in which a plurality, rather than a majority, is needed to win the chancellor's office. In this situation, the leftist parties unite behind one leader who can get a larger portion of the votes than either the CDU or AfD. It is also conceivable that Merz would ask his own party to vote against himself to ruin the AfD's chances in government. Thus, Germany would end up with a left-wing chancellor such as Olaf Scholz or Robert Habeck. It is worth noting that Eugyppius does not think that this catastrophic outcome will happen, but it is a possibility nonetheless. The third possibility he mentions involves Merz becoming chancellor with AfD support. In this scenario, the CDU goes back on its pledge to avoid a minority government. Unfortunately, it appears to be the case that a CDU-AfD coalition will not materialize this time around. Conservatives are simply too cucked to break free of the Cordon Sanitaire completely. However, the coming weeks do represent an opportunity to wound the Cordon Sanitaire in a way that it has never been wounded before. If this can be achieved, perhaps future opportunities will reveal themselves as the left's stranglehold on European politics weakens.